since I was drafted here, I've done nothing but give the city my all. I think everybody knows that. I've gotten some really good years out of me. And for however long I'm going to be here, I'm going to continue giving my all out there. All I care about is winning, man. Everybody know that. I want to win. Straight up, and I excuse my language, but everybody know that. That's who I am. That's that passion, that fire, that heart. That's what y'all love. You feel me? And I'm gonna continue giving that as long as I'm here.
That's Jacksonville Jaguars star cornerback Jalen Ramsey expressing his love and respect for his teammates and organization. However, it's hard to ignore last Sunday's sideline altercation with head coach Doug Marrone. Perhaps a physical manifestation of tensions rising between the team and Ramsey over the course of his tumultuous 3-year tenure in Jacksonville. All right, right now we welcome in our NFL analyst Marcus Spears. Stephen A., we'll start with you. Has the bridge been burned between the Jags and Jalen Ramsey?
I don't think it's been burnt. I don't think it's over. I think that it can be salvaged. Jacksonville just has to do the right things, and they have to be better. They've only won like 2 of their last 14 games, so clearly, losing could take its toll. This man wants to win. Let's call it what it is. He definitely wants to win, and let's applaud him for his restraint because obviously he had a lot that he wanted to say, but he didn't want to give anybody any additional headlines, and that was smart of him. And he was absolutely right in pointing out that neither him nor his agent put out the noise about him wanting to be traded. That emanated or leaked from the Jacksonville Jaguars. It wasn't from him. So let's give credit where credit is due in that regard, particularly considering the residue from Antonio Brown's fiascos in Oakland. Having said all of that, I think if you win games, because they only won 2 of their last 14, if you start winning games, and if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and you finally take care of a defensive player, because I think in the last 2 years, only like 1 defensive player has received an extension from the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you start taking care of dudes in that regard, I do think it could be salvaged. Now, do I believe it will? I don't, because I believe that the Jacksonville Jaguars will probably be themselves. But to say that it can't happen, I think you can win some games. If you look at this schedule, Marcus, they got the Tennessee Titans coming up. That's going to be a tough one. I assume they'll be 0-3. But then you got Denver. That's a winnable game. Carolina's a winnable game. New Orleans at home without Drew Brees. That's a winnable game. The Cincinnati Bengals, that's a winnable game. The Jets are a winnable game. And then you got the Houston Texans at home, who you just lost to 13-12 on the road. And so you're talking about 6 of the next 7 games, basically, that they can really, really make some noise. And I think that as long as that possibility exists, and then you also acknowledge that this is our best player, we're going to take care of him, I do think things could be remedied. And that's the operative word here, could, because we're asking the question as to whether or not the bridge is burned or what have you. Jacksonville needs to make amends. They could do it. We have to see whether they will or not.
So here's the thing. I'm sorry, Marcus. I think the bridge has been burned, Stephen A., and it's because of the franchise that he works for, and it's who runs the show there. Consider what happened with Tom Coughlin before the Giants won the Super Bowl, and he'd already had success in the NFL. But his kind of way of, culture-changing ways and doing everything wasn't working, and some players were talking about it and not happy with it. Then he won Super Bowls there. Now he's in Jacksonville. And by the way, maybe some players aren't going to like the way he handles things, but Coughlin's very stubborn and likes doing things his way. And there's a way you can do things with Coughlin, and there's a way that won't work as well. So, for example, Tiki Barber was consistently critical of Coughlin. Jeremy Shockey had a falling out after he got hurt, and he came back. He didn't want to participate in certain things. When the Giants won the Super Bowl, Barber was gone. Shockey was gone. When Strahan and those guys had a little problem with Coughlin, but they knew how to handle themselves, the idea was, let's form a leadership committee, right? Veterans get on the, and Coughlin worked. Also, his job was a little bit in jeopardy at that point, and he was able to work things out with them, and they won another Super Bowl. The point is, there's a way certain things will fly in that organization, in a Coughlin-run organization, and there's certain things that won't. And Jalen Ramsey's approach, I know it was incidental physical contact with the coach on the sidelines. Nevertheless, it got to that level. It was kind of incidental, but it happened. And his continuing to talk about it in the media openly and wanting a trade, that will mean that he is not long for a Tom Coughlin-run organization, in my view. That would be my prediction based on years of watching him Coughlin operate. I do not think this is a mendable bridge. I think that it has been burned and that the Jags will get something really good for a really good player on the trade market.
I have to agree with Max because this is not just pertaining to the situation that transpired on the sideline, Stephen A. Remember when we first came into the season, Jalen Ramsey was trying to get his money. So he had an issue with the front office previous to the season starting. Now you have the situation with Doug Marrone. Now, here's what I will say. People need to temper down on the Doug Marrone situation because in games, those are normal occurrences. Now, obviously, the contact that Jalen had, and I ain't for putting your hands on anybody. I don't care if it was incidental or if it was on purpose. Don't put your hands on anybody. But with that being said, he has a deep-rooted bad feeling for the Jacksonville Jaguars. His talent has really kind of covered up a lot of his ill will towards the organization and the things that they are doing. Remember, this team 2 years ago was in the playoffs and they were balling. Now you get 2 years of mediocrity, and Stephen A., I totally agree with you on what the schedule does, and I've always been one proponent that winning is the cure-all to everything. Only problem with this particular situation when we talk about winning is that Jalen Ramsey is in an environment he doesn't want to be in, and that's the difference. The difference is not the football team or things that occur on the field. It's the environment that he's in. He's had a problem with it before this even transpired on the sideline.
And he has every right.
Well, listen, hold on. I think it's important that y'all recognize, I know that y'all are right. What I'm saying is the operative word is could when we're talking about the bridge being burned. I'm saying that it can be salvaged. Now, do we believe it will be? No, because Jacksonville's history tells us otherwise. For example, Tom Coughlin might need to go. Doug Marrone might need to go. You got a guy in Jalen Ramsey that can make an argument that he's the best cornerback in football. He's getting paid $3.6 million this year. And even though they didn't want to even entertain contract extension talks with him last year or even prior to this season, this man watched guys drafted at pretty much, ahead of him, but in the same draft right up there with them, Carson Wentz, Ezekiel Elliott, Jared Goff. They all got their money. That they're offensive players, obviously. Two's a quarterback, one's a running back. He's a defensive player. We get all of that, but we also have to point to the fact that you had, when they went to the AFC Championship game, you had 6 Pro Bowlers on the defensive side of the ball. None of them got an extension. The one person who ultimately was taken care of was when you brought Malik Jackson in, who wasn't even a part of that team at that particular moment in time, and you took care of him. But you didn't take care of any of those other dudes, and most of them left. And so when you have that going on and you're not taking care of cats and you underpaying them and you're as rigid as Tom Coughlin has been known to be, and then Doug Marrone with his underachieving self, all right, losing 12 of the last 14 games for crying out loud, got the nerve to get in your face on the sidelines, you're going to have a problem with that. But I'm just saying you can clean that stuff up because it's not that he wants out of Jacksonville. He wants away from those guys. Right. And somewhere along the way, the organization is going to have to make a choice as to how valuable one of the top cornerbacks, if not the top cornerback in the league, is to a franchise, particularly when you consider the level of ineptitude that they remember. They didn't give those defensive players that money. Off the AFC Championship game, the person who got paid was Blake Bortles. And Blake Bortles, now they're paying $16.5 million with cap money just to have him off the damn team. These are the kind of things that have to change.
I 100% understand where you're coming from. It's a decision ownership. Like, this is beyond Coughlin. This is beyond Doug Marrone. This is ownership. Like, whose side are we going to take when you start talking about if Jalen Ramsey is going to be here or not? They did pay Myles Jack in that defense just here recently. But I understand exactly where you're coming from. Here's the problem. Here's the real issue. There is an overall arching theme right now happening in the NFL, and Jalen Ramsey is just the latest of it. I'm not feeling this environment. I want to get out of here. So does ownership say, look, we are going to change the environment that's causing one of our star players to be disgruntled and want to be out of here? Or do we side with Doug Marrone and do we side with Tom Coughlin and say we're going to get Jalen out of here and try to get something back to make a guy come fit into the culture? This is an interesting time in the NFL that we're facing, especially after what we saw with Minkah Fitzpatrick as well. So it's a decision that ownership is going to have to make. Are they choosing Coughlin and Doug Marrone, or are they choosing Jalen Ramsey?
That is a tough decision for sure. We've got to get to break, but Marcus, can you promise me one thing?
Yes.
Can you come back and stay with us for the next segment, too?
Absolutely.
I know you.
Just
bet.
because you asked, Ross. Just because you asked. I don't know about these other two, but because you asked, I'll stay for the next segment.
I mean, I don't think he sounds as deferential and appreciative as he should. Him and Damian Woody. It's something that these big boys, Max. These big boys want to come on the show and flex. Ain't nobody scared of y'all.
I'm biased.
Ain't nobody scared of y'all. Y'all ain't gonna do anything.
I'm glad you didn't ask,
and
I'm glad Max didn't ask.
You watch your mouth, man.
But because
you
Ross asked,
you
I'm a stay.
You understand?
Thank you, Marcus.
And by the way, that gray suit don't vibe with the background in the studio you in.
Stephen A. be trying to go to break.
Stephen A. say you got to match
Super
the background.
Cam. We're going to be talking about Cam Newton coming up next. Stay with us.
Whole new level. Match the background.